Good morning, everybody. The meeting's called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Diane Knoll, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we also take a moment of silence for the loss of Barbara Bush?
To add to that, before you sit down, a moment of silence for our Commissioner John Baylor from Trail Creek, who recently passed away. All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming. There's a slight change in the agenda this morning. The FHWA, FTA report has been moved to a future date. And in case you don't remember, I'd like to reintroduce Ethan Lowe, sitting in for Dave Hollenbeck today. Thank you for attending. First thing on our agenda is public comment. Let's see the blue sheet.
We have one.
We have one? Yes, it's going to be Jim Nowacki. That's just a hunch, but wait till we see the blue.
Mr. President, I'll just start my comments now.
Sure, go ahead. You
Got my timer here.
Great, thank you.
First of all, I'd like to address the issue of conflicting meetings, particularly the conflicting meetings between the NIRPC board meeting and the RDA board meeting. I know that at great expense to the public, the NIRPC staff was instructed to write a letter to the RDA staff to request that they not schedule their meetings in conflict with NIRPC, because so many important issues are discussed at both meetings, and many members of the public and parts of the administration would potentially have an interest in activities at both of those meetings. As today reflects, of course, that the RDA has just ignored a simple request to honor another fellow governmental agency. And I would just request that the board take this serious, the conflict that has been ignored by the RDA, and maybe write another letter. They rescheduled to have their meeting today. It just seems ridiculous on the face of it. I do also want to talk about the condition of the 1220 project and Route 53 project. These are two very expensive and very important brand new projects. $40 million on 1220, another $15 million on Route 53. You go to an intersection in my community, Gary, Indiana, and you find the intersection of those two very important and very expensive projects are just collapsing into ruin. Authentic, verifiable, not hard to find potholes at the intersection where these two important projects, they're just completed. The Route 53 project is not even half a season old and is already falling apart. And I'm not saying just some minor problems, I'm saying entire sections of the pavement collapsing. Speaking of pavement collapsing, I'm reminded of an article that just appeared in the Northwest Indiana Times. Some of you have read it, about Route 51. A sinkhole had been developing in that street. I think there's some other sinkholes in that town. And it had gotten to a point where it swallowed an entire car. This is not it's not because nobody knew it. INDOT had been informed, just like INDOT is informed month after month when I come to these meetings, and all I request is that the road be done properly. Today, as I was waiting for the bus, whole lane of traffic, covered with water. We're told it's going to be fixed, but it hasn't been fixed today. Me and a fellow resident of our city had to step back while the cars were throwing a plume of water on the walkway. My time is up, but I'll be back next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from March 15th, 2018 Executive Board. I entertain a motion. You have a motion? Is there a second? Any other comments? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. Passed. Next is the report of the Executive Director. Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. We have a couple of presentations today, so it's actually a packed Executive Director's report today, but let me just make a few comments before we move on to those presentations. First of all, we have a new staff member I'd like to introduce to you. I think she's still back there. Dominique Edwards, if you could stand up. Thank you, Dominique. Dominique is our new public participation planner. And just a quick note on her background, if you don't mind me doing this, Dominique. She has a master's in sustainable urban development from DePaul. Worked for the Faith Community Development Corporation and the Emerson Spotlight Program in Gary. Has done community work in Michigan City and has been on the board of directors for the Northwest Indiana Food Council and was director of development for Gary Urban Farms. So has quite a great background with community involvement, and we're thrilled to have her on board to help with our outreach efforts and to make sure that all the work that NIRPC is doing gets out to the widest amount of people possible and gets the greatest amount of input possible. So very glad to have Dominique on board. Dominique is also giving new life to a newsletter we used to have called the Regional View that is getting retooled and reshaped, and you should be receiving that in your inboxes very, very soon. So be on the lookout for our newly formatted vehicle to help keep you abreast of everything that NIRPC's got going on. So appreciate her work in that as well. At your places, there's a couple of items I want to draw your attention to. We are partnering with the Northwest Indiana Forum on a brownfield redevelopment workshop. Kathy will be, of course, very heavily involved in that. That takes place on April 25th. There's registration information. I think you just contact the forum, correct, to register for the event. And Kathy can give you any more information that you want on that. We're really thrilled to be partnering with the forum and really trying to do the best we can to match these sites that desperately need redevelopment with folks that have the potential to redevelop them. So it's actually very, very exciting. And then Trey will mention this as well in his presentation, but just to make note, you also have in your places the meeting schedule for upcoming public meetings for our 2050 plan. I don't want to take anything away from Trey's presentation, but we are relaunching now the 2050 plan process. You're well aware of the 2040 plan. And we're kicking this off with a series of meetings all throughout the region, which is a list right in front of you. So I strongly, strongly encourage you, if there is one near you, to please try to attend. We would love to have your presence there. The last thing I want to mention, NDOT will also be presenting this morning, and I know we'll make mention of this, but just wanted to, it doesn't hurt to have reputation because it's such a great program. The local tracks program for rail overpass, hopefully trying to solve some of these crossing programs, which was announced in Jim Tunn's neck of the woods right there in Chesterton, which was great. And obviously we have the worst problems, I think, in Northwest Indiana. If you recall, we had done a study at some point to identify the 15 worst grade crossings in Northwest Indiana, so we've already got some good data in terms of prioritization on what would be the biggest bang for the buck, which feeding into this. And just to offer NIRPC staff, if you need any assistance at all with this program and you're able to pull things together, don't hesitate to contact NIRPC staff. This is a phenomenal opportunity. I'm really thankful for NDOT offering this, and wanted to make sure that you had that on your radar screen. Given that I don't think there's entirely a community in Northwest Indiana that's not affected by these rail crossing issues. So with that, I think that's all I have on my kind of prelude issues. And I'm going to kick it right over to Trey Wadsworth, our Director of Transportation, for these next two items.
Good morning, Commissioners. So first I'll talk to you about the 2050 plan development. So we've been working as staff for the last couple of months to get ready for the launch of the 2050 plan work. All right, so we started right at the top there. We're kind of going to use the 2040 plan as a cornerstone to launch from. It's a great framework. It was an award-winning plan. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So we're going to kind of use the vision and need that were identified in that plan as a launch point. We are going to incorporate a new type of planning process. It's a qualitative scenario planning approach. It allows us to identify trends and influences that are going to impact potentially Northwest Indiana. Those things could be technology, different land use scenarios, economic development trends, socioeconomic changes. What we'll do with those trends and influences, we'll put them together into 3 different futures that could potentially impact us as a region. Then at the same time, we'll be incorporating the performance-based planning requirements that are required of us by FHWA and FTA. That is putting attention to making sure our planning activities and programming of capital dollars go towards the vision and needs that are established in the plan and defining that feedback loop so we can demonstrate performance. Then we will identify the strategies and investments that will work in most of those futures, because the idea here is that not to try to pick one future and hope we get there, but identify different types of futures that can happen to us and find investments and strategies that work in most of them. And then we will incorporate the creation of the NOFA. This is a call for projects that we do periodically to put your community's projects into our transportation improvement program. That process needs to align with the long-range plan, so we're going to take that opportunity to do it all at once. With that, though, we'll also be trying to create clear and consistent evaluation methods for those strategies and investments. Try to bring a little bit more simplicity to the process. Make it easier for all the communities to approach us as the MPO to seek federal funding for the transportation investments we seek for your communities. And then the last major element or product is to create an action plan for NIRPC, where we'll hopefully identify things we're responsible for implementing, things we need to work with partners on to implement, and things that we simply are just a catalyst to start a conversation. So the timeline of the 2050 plan development, as you can see, we are now past the yellow boxes, which was what we were just most recently working on, which is largely a preparatory phase. We did a retrospective on the 2040 plan to see what we've accomplished since 2011. We kind of took stock of all the different federal inputs that are required of a long-range plan, identified different state and regional priorities through the existing plans that are already adopted by INDOT and other state agencies, as well as regional priority plans throughout our 3 counties. We also did a, not entirely scientific, but somewhat benchmarking against peer MPOs, trying to identify regions throughout the nation that have similar characteristics to us, such as maybe having a big metro area right next door, like Chicago, and trying to see what those similarities are and what kind of planning activities they do and what we may want to consider in the 2050 plan. And lastly, substantial effort in preparing for the outreach that will be so integral to the development of this plan. So I won't go through each of these steps in detail, but in the pink boxes are where we're going to have dedicated public engagement. So the first one is actually set to launch on April 30th. We'll do 10 public meetings. We'll also have an online survey. As well, throughout this entire process, we will be engaging with all of the topical committees that currently exist. They all have their own portfolio of activities and interests, and so we'll be engaging throughout the process there. In the H step, which is where we're going to develop those scenarios, we'll go back out to the public to hear their feedback on the different types of futures we may experience. In the L step is where we will look to identify investments and strategies to consider, and we'll definitely need the help of the public on that one. And then the last public engagement area in Q is just more of a traditional, this is the draft plan, did we get it right, is there anything we need to change before we seek your adoption in May 2019. So just as a reminder, from the 2040 plan, the vision and goals were the broad statements: we want a vibrant region, revitalized region, an accessible region, and a united region. So we're going to use this framework as the major driver of the first engagement period. Is this still correct? Do we need to make tweaks? We're going to try to establish goal statements associated with each one of these, as well as the 5 plan areas of the 2040 plan, bringing forward into 2050. So that's in the environment, growth and conservation, human and economic resources, stewardship and governance, and transportation, as well as identifying needs that folks think that we need to work on in order to achieve those goals and the vision of the overall plan. So these are the locations of the 10 meetings. We tried to identify them across the 3 counties, trying to make sure that we hit all the different characteristics of our region: urban, rural, near rural, suburban. We've even tried to, we're doing 1-day meeting to see if maybe if anyone works at night, they can come during the day. So we hope we've cast a wide net on the region to invite as many people as possible to share their thoughts and ideas. As well, at the same time, we'll be launching that survey I discussed. So on the initial announcement of the public meetings, we did a quick poll. I thought it'd be kind of fun to just share what we've got so far. 45 respondents. We sent it out to 1,400 people, so it's a very low turnout. So it's certainly unscientific. But the leading contender at this point was environment. 39% of the respondents said that was the most important issue to them, followed by transportation, then growth and conservation of human and economic resources, and finally stewardship and governance. So with that,
I might throw just a quick comment in just to say, I think some of you are aware that the Northwest Indiana Forum has kicked off this economic development strategy process that we are involved in as well. And we've had very, very good conversations. So just let's, when we start seeing other activities going on related to that, we've worked very hard to work with them and had direct meetings with their consultant to make sure that these processes are in sync. So and I'm feeling very good about that. Their process will be able to feed into this 2050 process, and we've got that lined up. So if you're involved in that process and end up doing something with the forum's effort, just know that we're tied in with that as well. So.
Yes. I saw there was 2 on there for Maryville, but I didn't see anything that was located in South Lake County, more to the south, where I thought maybe you could have had something maybe down in Low.
so we try to balance it with the access to the meetings, so trying to identify places we can meet with transit. There's only one location on the map that does not have transit access to it, and that is Crown Point. So that is it's a hard, fine line to struggle to try to make sure everyone can participate, but make sure everyone has access to the meetings.
Any other questions?
Maybe I could set this up as NDOTs you're starting off, right? If you recall, Representative Soliday at some point in a previous meeting had asked some questions about dealing with congestion, and speaking of South Lake County. And obviously we partner with NDOT, depending on funding streams, projects, etc. So as we've talked, we have developed a short presentation here to talk about what happens in South Lake County, how we deal with vehicular traffic in South Lake County. And we're going to do this as a tandem item with Matt and Lindsay kicking us off, and then handing it over to Trey, and then any other questions you have. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk, because a lot of people have asked about what's going on with congestion in South Lake, to be able to address how we do these projects, how projects get into the stream, and what's already planned. So with that, turn it over to Matt.
Morning. Good morning. I'm Matt Dykshley. For those who don't know, I'm Communications Director for NDOT's LaPorte District. Lindsay is our Capital Programs Director in the LaPorte District as well. So with construction season beginning and the 1-year anniversary this month of the signing of House and Roll Act 1002, we wanted to kind of touch base on what NDOT has in store over the coming year and also the coming years after that. So we'll touch on some mobility projects and also some opportunities where local communities can also help themselves from a mobility standpoint, as Ty was saying, but also some pavement restoration, things like that. So as you see here, 1 year ago this month, Governor Holcomb signed House Enrolled Act 1002, a 20-year funding plan for state and local highway investment. Obviously something we're all very thankful for the infrastructure of the state, but also local communities as well. Something that is sorely needed as well.
So this is a breakdown of new state funding and new local funding, and this is in addition to the funding that we already have in place. So as you can see, it incrementally increases through to 2024. And just to give some perspective, typically for statewide, the capital program currently is usually around $900 to $1 billion every year. So we are almost doubling our state program, and it's very similar on the local side as well, as far as the funding that will now be available, or additional funding that will be available to both the state and the locals.
So the first 5 years of Next Level Roads, not as much of a mobility focus on this part. This is mostly focusing on fixing what we have. So $5.1 billion in total investments across the state. We're servicing nearly 10,000 lane miles across the state, and 1,300 bridges will be either repaired or replaced. So there are mobility projects involved in that, but fixing what we have is the main focus on those first 5 years.
So here's a breakdown of LaPorte District, and there's the LaPorte District total, and then breakdowns for each of the 3 counties in the NIRPC area. And you may notice the drop-off in fiscal years 21 and 22. And that's because our program is not fully set yet. Timing is actually in Charles's inbox for next month. There will be a large TIP amendment for our fiscal year 21 program. So those are more short-term delivery projects, your resurface program, some of those things. These that are already in the program for 21 and 22 are larger scale projects that require a little more in-depth analysis, stakeholder involvement, and things like that. So speaking to safety and mobility, NDOT currently has 29 projects in the NIRPC area over the next couple of fiscal years, totaling $45.5 million. And these are things like new signals, intersection improvements, adding turn lanes to areas, roundabouts. We even actually have a new interchange for the intersection of US 20 and State Road 2 that is in the program to be built. So that's kind of what we have to address safety and mobility in the program currently for the next couple of fiscal years.
So Lindsay and I wanted to kind of touch on just a handful of projects over the next few years that are addressing mobility. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, and we're focusing on Lake County mostly in this presentation. There are other, as Lindsay was saying, the interchange in LaPorte County, but just a few of the projects here. Obviously, if you're not aware, you will be soon with construction. I-65 added travel lanes between US 30 and State Road 2. This is a 2-year project. Last year was our first year. We're on track to be complete this fall. So I'm sure you've seen plenty of work going on out there. As usual, we ask you to slow down those areas for the safety of the workers and yourselves. But yes, added travel lane between US 30 and State Road 2. In addition, this project also has the Kankakee River bridges that are being addressed. The bridge is being reconstructed, but in addition to that, they are being widened to accommodate further expansion. So down the road, obviously we'd all like to see I-65 expand an extra travel lane beyond State Road 2, and this will help accommodate that when that opportunity arises. Touching on State Road 55, obviously some mobility issues on State Road 55, so we're addressing that with some smaller projects, but we think they can have an impact in 2018, 2020, 2022. So between 129th Avenue and 57th Avenue, we're adding some turn lanes, some added traffic signals, and a roundabout in that area as well. So some small steps, but they can really help to increase mobility and the safety in that area. Also, US 41. It says added travel lanes, which is the actual description of the project, but it's a turn lane, single turn lane for both left and right turns. So that's going to be between 82nd Lane and 72nd Avenue, and also between US 231 and 93rd Avenue, all in the St. John area. Obviously, mobility and safety is going to be a big benefit in this area. In Crown Point, US 231, US 231 at Bath Key Road, that's going to be an added traffic signal there as well to help with the mobility and safety in this area. Also 8094 to I-65. So this may seem like a small step to increase mobility, but we're changing the pavement markings out there and the signage to help channelize that traffic a little better. What this is going to do is increase mobility simply because folks will understand a better way to travel in those lanes. So again, it seems like a small step, but some of the ways we're increasing some mobility out there. So we also want to touch on beyond the next 5 years. So Next level roads includes additional funding as the state makes yearly investments to improve safety and mobility. There are some investments coming up to reduce congestion and increase the safety on US 30 is one of the options here as well. Planning for the future, we're looking at lots of different funding options, and this Next Level Roads initiative gives the state several different options to look at to help for those larger projects down the road that will increase mobility and economic development. So that's they have lots of different options that we are studying right now, and more to come on that.
So some other ways that NDOT with Tax and Rural Act 2002 has increased funding to the locals. We're entering into our third round of community crossings calls. So I don't have a date yet. It is to be later this year. They're currently working on a new online application. It'll be still short, the one-page application, but it's my understanding that it'll all be completed online, and this will also help reduce some of the errors we've experienced where somebody left something blank. This would not let you submit if it's blank and required, things like that to kind of help the quality of those and help all of us through this process. So I don't have a date yet, but we are going to be doing, this is still a funded program and will be happening here probably sometime this summer. So, and then also similar to how Ty mentioned, we do have the local tracks program that was recently announced, and the LaPorte district, we had our district meeting on Monday, but there is still another district meeting if you haven't yet attended or you need somebody to attend. It's tomorrow in Vincennes. But all of this information is also on our website. There's the PowerPoint and additional information, and they do have an email address set up on the website too if you have questions. Those applications will be opening up May 1st. So, and it's desperately needed in our area. We have several railroad crossings. Almost a third of the at-grade railroad crossings in the state are within the LaPorte district. So this is definitely something that your communities could use, and a program that's a good.
Before we close here, one thing I wanted to address too, in case you folks had not heard about it. Just last week we debuted the new construction map for NDOT. So we've always had an online option for folks to search for projects coming up, both this year and in coming years for NDOT. But this is a much more user-friendly option here for folks to do. So you can see the address right there, nextlevelroads.ndot.in.gov. I've used this site since they debuted it, and also before they were debuting it, and I'm very excited to see that this is very user-friendly. Unfortunately, previous to that, some things, they were still user-friendly, but not as simple as this, where you can zoom in on your community, you can zoom in on a county, an entire region, and see what projects are coming over the next few years, or even just this year. So a great resource. We encourage you to use it and share that with your folks in your local communities. If you have questions about this and how to use it, again, very user-friendly, but if you have questions, you're welcome to talk to me about that, and I'll help out however I can.
I might interject real quick. When the Regional View newsletter comes out, look for that, because we'll have a link to that in that newsletter for you to access.
We're going to turn it over to Trey now, unless anybody has any questions.
Mr. Chair, with the tracks program, my understanding is expanded beyond just the grade separation. We can include safety considerations, lighting, that kind of thing.
I believe to a degree. I mean, we do have a separate, it's called Section 130 program for safety. So, I mean, I would look into, I believe there are some, I guess, guidelines and things that are posted to the website of what is included and not. Because it has expanded, but I'm not aware of there. So we have several programs. So if it doesn't fit local tracks, it probably still would fit in the Section 130 program. So
I just want everybody to know there's opportunities beyond just a very expensive grade separation project.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do have one question. You mentioned earlier something about the almost 1/3 of railroad crossings in the state of Indiana is in LaPorte County.
LaPorte District, our 13 counties,
Okay.
sorry, not just LaPorte County.
Sorry about that. All right, thank you.
Nobody can get anywhere with that.
Well, we don't.
I have a question, real quick. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask the question anyway. Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint?
Sure, not a problem.
Great, thank you.
I'll just send it to Ty, and they can
Sure.
Awesome.
Great, thank you.
There we go.
way, most PowerPoints are on the website and accessible to everybody. So if you didn't know that, poke around on the NIRPC website. Yeah.
All right, good morning again. I'm joined with Scott Weber, one of my team members who will help me talk about congestion management. So just to provide a little bit more context to the planning that NIRPC does, it all starts with the long-range plan, which we just talked about, 2050. Of course, it responds to public feedback and demonstrated needs for a transportation system in the region, sets the vision and direction for the work we're going to do, is required by federal law, and all the planning and construction activities must be consistent with the plan. And must be fiscally constrained, and of course, the projects may not contribute in excess to our air quality budgets. So that's an important distinction when we're talking about congestion projects. We have to make sure that they fit within the parameters of the Clean Air Act. So then that goes into our Unified Planning Work Program, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the agenda, but that is the program of all planning activities that NIRPC staff complete. It responds to the needs identified in the long-range plan, and it includes the planning activities associated with the congestion management process that Scott will talk more about. And the results of the planning studies assist in development of potential construction projects to be pursued by either NDOT or our local partners. And those projects end up in the Transportation Improvement Program. It is the construction activities, design activities, right-of-way acquisition, funds provided by FHWA and FTA for at least the next 4 years required by federal law. It does, of course, include local projects as well as NDOT projects. It has to be consistent with the long-range plan. If it is not, we have to amend the long-range plan, which we've done from time to time over the past few years. And of course, as well, those projects cannot exceed air quality budgets as well either. So then we just kind of hand off the responsibility for execution and implementation to NDOT and our local partners to implement the projects that have been identified in the TIP. So that's the kind of overall framework of the planning. Of course, the long-range plan, the 2040 plan, is the one enforced and approved by FHWA. It's updated every 4 years. The last plan had several emphasis areas on environmental justice, ladders of opportunity, to grow strategically throughout the region, and to protect our open spaces and agricultural land, and reinvest in urban core communities. With the 2050 plan now underway, we'll consider the issues and the trends and influences on our future. Congestion in South Lake is obviously one of them. We'll engage the public to hear more about what they need from our transportation system. But one of the major initiatives from the 2040 plan was the regional corridor studies. Issues and needs identified from the 2040 plan that directly were addressed within this study was the need to improve the internal connectivity of our transportation network, enhance the connectivity between the housing and jobs and educational facilities we see throughout the region, reduce congestion and travel time. It resulted in the identification of gaps within our roadway network between the regional highways and local arterials. Overall, 22 gaps were identified, and 12 of those gaps were located south of 57th Avenue in Lake County. Of those 12, 2 are currently being worked on Main Street and 109 Avenue. So I'm going to go over to Scott to talk about congestion management.
So the congestion management process, as Trey mentioned, is from our UPWP, our Unified Planning Work Program, which basically funds the activities of our transportation staff here at NIRPC. But one of the particular areas in UPWP is the congestion management process. This is where we identify the areas of congestion on the network. So we actually have access to what's called the National Performance Measure Research Data Set, which is a probe data set that comes in from cell phones and passively collected data from GPS devices, so that it's gathered every 5 minutes on a road network every day of the year. So we have a massive amount of data that we're mining for the national highway system. Now that only covers the major highways, but we supplement that with data that's collected at the local level, traffic counts, etc., that we get from NDOT and our local partners, as well as NDOT provides support through some NREX data. So we kind of combine all this data set as well as a travel demand model, and we identify the areas where we see congestion. As you can see on the map, there's a lot of red and orange in South Lake County, which indicates a poor level of service, in other words, more congestion. But we're going to continue to work on this congestion management process because in the past, our congestion management process has been more of a black and white type of issue where we collect the data, but then we kind of determine whether or not it meets or doesn't meet. And in the future, it's going to become more nuanced. And so the Surface Transportation Committee here at NIRPC will oversee that process. And we're going to use data collected not only from the National Performance Measure Research data set, but also the household travel survey that NIRPC is conducting actually this year, where we're sampling over 2,000 households in Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties to determine where people travel on a daily basis, and every member of their household. So we'll collect all this data, and then we'll make it a more nuanced process where we look at each alternative corridor and score it instead of making it a yes or no, black and white issue. So that's what we're going to be doing there. Next. So also, this whole idea of congestion management fits into the performance-based planning framework that US DOT at the federal level is implementing. So every metropolitan planning organization, including NIRPC, will be tasked with coming up with this performance-based planning process. And essentially, and it's in the legislation in the FAST Act, we will have to connect the concepts of transportation planning, performance management, and investment programming all together to show that the investments that we're making and that we're programming help move the needle in terms of some quantifiable measures, as you can see on the right. For example, in congestion and freight, we look at the annual hours of the national highway system, peak hour excessive delay per capita. In other words, how many hours people are spending in their cars unnecessarily during peak hours. And also the percentage of the national highway system peak hour non-single occupant vehicle travel. How much people are using alternative methods than driving alone to work. The percentage of the interstate person miles traveled that are reliable. In other words, how consistent on a day-to-day basis are traveling on our highways and our roads. The percentage of the non-interstate NHS, again, and as well as the level of truck travel time reliability in the interstates. How efficient is freight moving? How predictable can freight carriers ensure that they're going to arrive on time? So these are all measures at the federal level that are being implemented and that will be tracking the data.
And much like the executive board a couple months ago adopted the safety target, congestion measures and targets will be set by NDOT no later than May 20th of this year. And then we will have 6 months to either support NDOT's congestion measures targets, or we can adopt our own. Scott has work underway with Valparaiso University doing a couple of more too.
Right, so a collaborative between NIRPC and Valparaiso University involves a project where students at Valparaiso University are helping us mine this massive data set that I mentioned, the National Performance Measure Research data set, and those students are going to have a result by May where they've processed it. So when NDOT comes up with their targets on May 20th, we'll be prepared to determine how that fits into our region. So the students are very much involved in that, and it's been a great process.
So then I wanted to demonstrate for you as well the locations of our currently programmed projects. So I don't know if everyone knows, this is on our website under the transportation section under the transportation improvement program. But this is a location of all the currently programmed projects within our TIP. You can explore them at your leisure, but it's a great tool, and it's got some project information about each one of them. But specifically to congestion, these are the locations of projects that within South Lake County that are currently our program and address congestion in some manner. So that they're throughout both NDOT-sponsored projects and local and county-sponsored projects. I won't go through all of them right now, but there's several, obviously. And then in summary, we plan to document the challenges and opportunities within our region through the planning activities conducted with the feds, state partners and local partners. Our results hopefully result in recommendations on transportation investments, and then we work together with our local and state partners, but it is ultimately up to them to carry out those recommendations in their capital projects. And then also, we only receive about $20 million in our TIP for highway funding, so just to set the expectations of how much we can achieve with the funding that's allocated directly to the NIRPC program. And of course, the municipalities have to be able to come up and match, which you all know very well.
Very good. Just thank you, Trey and Scott and Lindsay and Matt. Really appreciate it. I mean, I suppose if there's any other questions, but hope that gave you an overview of what's happening in South Lake County, as well as the whole process of how projects get into the pipeline, how they get funded, and how this all fits together, and why this is so critically important, just to make a full loop back to the beginning. when we do this 2050 plan, how this all feeds together, why it's important to get that plan and that vision right, so that these projects can address the real needs and desires of Northwest Indiana. So this all fits together, and that's how it all works. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the report of the chair, and I don't think I have much to say, but do you want to mention our potential for that?
Oh, sure.
So, Ty and I have been invited to go to Las Vegas to double your money.
Yes. We're trying to get you more local match.
No, seriously, we've been invited to go to see the Hyperloop. There's a Hyperloop project plan for connecting Chicago to Columbus, Ohio to Pittsburgh. And so we've been invited, we're going out with the Columbus Metropolitan Planning Organization called NIRPC. And it'll be a quick trip, but it should be very interesting to see.
And just, this is one of those things, and you probably read about this in the news and whatnot, and it's one of those things that's very, what's the word, visionary, science fiction-ish almost, but is just like autonomous vehicles are moving much faster than I think anybody really expected. This whole Hyperloop concept has gained a lot more, pardon the pun, traction, although there's no traction because it's magnetic, but it's getting a whole lot more traction than anybody thought, frictionless. And just I had actually thought at some point we should do a presentation on this in more detail, but the basic concept is if you're able to take a compartment, I don't know how else to word it, there's probably some better terminology, and put it within a tube that then can reduce all friction in that tube, remove air from that tube.
So it's like going the drive up at the bank.
Yeah, it's like
your check in and it goes there.
too.
Imagine being in Las Vegas and your winnings in there and it's in LA in a half an hour.
So if these are extended across long distances, you eliminate friction. The times that they're talking about is the trip from Chicago to Columbus is a half hour on one of these. So with my counterpart at the Columbus MPO, we've talked about meeting up for lunch in Fort Wayne. So we'll see, but again, it's getting, the reason why this is becoming a reality is this company, Hyperloop One, put out a worldwide call and competition for corridors, and then selected and narrowed those down to look at much more detail. And I forget exactly how many are in the US, I want to say like 4 or 5. But as Jeff mentioned, the Chicago, Columbus, and Pittsburgh corridor was one of the ones that was finalized to be, try to take the next step and try to be tested. So there's getting a lot more reality to it than I think a lot of people thought. And so, like Jeff said, we got the opportunity to be out there and see this and how it's been tested and how far they've come. So we're looking forward to joining our colleagues from Columbus and Fort Wayne and others that are making the trip out for this.
That's it. That's my report. Next is Finance and Personnel Committee. George Tobin.
The committee met this morning and we reviewed the financial status from last month, and bank statements, reconciliation, expenses year to date, budget versus actual, and approved the claims register. Lots of exciting things for you today. Lisa, would you have anything to add to that? Okay. And report.
Great. Thank you. Legislative Committee, Mary Tanis.
Good morning. 3 items I wanted to bring to your attention this morning. In Northwest Indiana Times had an excellent story about Congressman Visclosky supporting the South Shore, which makes us all happy because hopefully that'll be moving on quickly. The second thing is General Assembly will be meeting in a special session in May for a very narrow group of projects that we should be aware of. Thirdly, Kathy Luther informed me this morning she had asked us to sign on. Kathy, you want to fill us in on that a little bit, the Great Lakes?
Well, last night at the Coastal Advisory Board meeting, there's a letter circulating around various groups of coastal states organizations to support ongoing funding for coastal programs, which our state, we've done millions of dollars of grants. So there's going to be a push going on to all stakeholders in the region to consider signing on to that letter to support coastal programming across the country. So there could be an announcement for NIRPC to support that.
So if you want, if you think that this is really important, certainly it sounds like something we could support, so please contact either myself or Mayor McDermott to see whether we can support this. With that, I'll turn it over to Mayor McDermott. Do you have anything to add? No, you're good? Okay, thank you very much.
I'd just like to welcome Hutch Patel, who's here with Senator Donnelly's office. Thank you, Hutch, for coming up and attending. Next is the Environmental Management Policy Committee. Bill Emerson.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We had a great meeting, April 5th meeting. We had our, twice a year we meet with the Urban Waters Partnership, which is the federal regulators for environmental issues. Really great meeting. Went long. We had to have a break in the middle, so it was a lot of information. We also heard from Indiana DNR that's putting together their Wetlands in Lieu Fee program, which is really great. For those of you who do projects that may impact wetlands and try not to, but sometimes it's unavoidable. So now they're, hopefully this year sometime there's going to be a program where you can just buy credits into larger wetland developments rather than trying to mitigate yourself on a smaller lot or something like that, which can get difficult, as some of you may know. So, yeah, it's a great meeting. Our next meeting is May 3rd at 9 a.m. This year, speaking with the chairman as well, I'd like to try to get the Environmental Management Policy Committee and also the full committee a little more informed on current environmental issues too. Hopefully get people to come and speak. We have issues with chromium discharges in Lake Michigan and lead issues throughout the area. And on the south end of our NIRPC area, we have the Kankakee River, which many of you know has seen historic flooding issues, and we're tackling on all angles. So any input's welcome, and be there May 3rd.
Thank you. Next is the Technical Planning Committee, Kevin Brightsky.
I would first like to express my appreciation for Jim Todd giving my report last time. Mr. Emerson and I are preoccupied. We had Kankakee River Basin Commission at the same time, and I think we would have preferred to have been here. But I'm glad we were both there and solved a lot of issues with that whole commission, and hopefully improve that whole situation down there with time. The Technical Planning Committee met on April 10th. The staff gave several updates, presented an overview of the 2050 plan development milestones and 24 retrospective, which you heard part of this morning. A 30-day comment period on draft fiscal year 2019-2020 Unified Planning Work Program ran from March 5th to April 4th. There were no comments received. The report can be found on page 9. Trey Wadsworth will explain the report.
Hello again. So yes, we put the 2019 to 2020 Unified Planning Work Program out for public comment on March 5th. Extended to April 4th. It was distributed to all of our interested parties. For 30 days, we did receive no public comments throughout that period, but we did receive some technical comments from INDOT, FHWA, and FTA. We discussed that shortly after with them for telecom rights, and I believe that those changes were addressed. None of them were substantial enough to change the tasks substantially, but they were requests to provide greater budget details, additional info on tasks and deliverables, minor typos, and then just confirm eligibility on one activity.
Any questions for Trey? There are two actions for consideration today. Resolution 1808, recommending fiscal year 2019-2020 Unified Planning Work Program, and that's found on pages 10 through 15. Trey Wadsworth will explain this action.
So for the 2019 to 2020 WPF, prepared a very brief overview of this document. It is, of course, required by FHW and FTA as a key activity of NIRPC as a BPO. It programs all transportation planning activities funded by either Metropolitan Planning Funding funds from FHWA or 5303 funds from FTA. It also includes additional planning activities funded by other federal sources such as the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, the Congestion Mitigation and Quality Program, and FTA 5307 funds. It also includes, because we are a council of governments, all the other activities conducted by NIRPC. So that fully represents all planning activities. So it's just some highlights of this UPWP. We kind of refreshed and updated the format. Tasks are now linked to the 2040 plan chapters, so they're more clearly identified by environment, growth and conservation, human and economic resources, stewardship and governance, or principally transportation tasks. Very few of them are their own tasks, all as themselves. Most of the work we do is multidisciplinary. So the long range and multimodal planning tasks are organized and aligned by topic of the committee. So if you serve on or are interested in surface transportation, you can find those tasks associated with that committee more easily now. The 2050 Plan of Development is the largest single planning task within the UPWP. And overall, there is about $2.5 million planning activity program for 2019 alone. Onto the right, you can see the breakdown of how the funding is spread across all of our different activities. The largest single group of activities is the data collection analysis that we spoke about before with the household travel survey and all the other data collection and analysis we do, followed then by the management of the planning process as well as our public participation. So with that, we are seeking action to approve.
The Technical Planning Committee recommends adoption of Resolution 1808. I'll make the motion.
Great.
Chair, I second.
Questions? Seconded.
Is there any way that this could have bigger print? Because it is extremely hard to read.
I second that, thank you.
The print on 11 through 14.
Oh, yeah.
It is very hard to read.
It's brutal to read. I got my glasses on.
In the actual act itself, it is much a larger piece of paper.
Could I second that though? Because we're supposed to approve this. So if you give us a blurred out, poor font budget, it's hard to approve it. I would be voting against it, just for the point.
No, I understand. In the document, it's formatted to be a much larger.
But we're supposed to approve it, and you're giving it to us, and it's hard to read.
Well, it's also online, so we're trying. But I think you're right. I have reading glasses too.
Yeah, I do too, but it's just smudges.
So there are some objections. Is there any further discussion? So all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
And those opposed signify by aye.
Aye.
Great. There you go, 2 opposed. I think that passes. Thank you.
A 7-day comment period on amendment number 12 to the fiscal year 2018-2021 Transportation Improvement Program was held. There were no comments received. The report can be found on page 15. James Winter will explain the report.
Thank you very much. Some of you may remember that last year about this time we rolled over several projects from our previous TIP into our current TIP as a placeholder until we could finalize our project selection process for transit projects. That process is still ongoing and has been folded into our 2050 plan development, like Trey mentioned earlier. And so what we're doing in this amendment is taking those projects that were originally submitted back in 2015, 2018, and updating them with current costs affiliated with those programs. So this represents about a little under $2 million in program changes for Program 307, which is the largest funding umbrella for the transit in the region, as well as several changes, significant changes to NIRPC programming for the Westlake and other projects.
Anybody with questions for James?
I have one. I'm looking on this sheet on page 19. It says South County Community Services is going from 10 vehicles down to 4. Is that, could you explain that?
Yes, so do you remember last year we had a whole set of E-list projects? So what we did was we created a program like a launch pad of projects that could be implemented if certain funding fell through at the state and federal level. And South Lake County benefited from that greatly and was able to move forward several projects ahead of schedule.
Okay.
So that's why we moved down from 10 buses down to 4.
The final action is on Resolution 1809, Amendment Number 12, the fiscal year 2018-2021 Transportation Improvement Program, found on pages 16 to 19. James Winter will explain this action.
Well, this is the same project I was discussing, but if there are any more questions about it, I'm happy to discuss that. I suppose I should have talked about the public comment period first, and then the actual discussion afterwards.
I'll just give you another opportunity.
There were no public comments received.
God bless you.
It's also worth noting that not all of these changes are program increases. There are several decreases as well. This is just as we get closer to the implementation timeline, chances are various these totals as needed.
Let's hopefully make that point today. The Technical Planning Committee recommends adoption of Resolution 1809.
Motion?
Sure.
It's been moved. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, it passes. Thank you.
We'll take that print later too.
Okay.
The next item on that we'd like to discuss is the Tiger Grant Program. Mitch Barloga, let's hear it. Oh, sure. And Mitch will explain what's going on with the program now.
Thank you. Many of you know that we've been working on a Tiger grant, federal grant, for several months regarding the Marquette Greenway project. And you also know that we were overlooked in the latest Tiger round. There are a lot of questions about if Tiger would be funded for the next few years, and it will be. The last spending bill that was passed by Congress did appropriate $1.5 million for Tiger. We had a conversation, myself, Trey, and Scott had a conversation with US DOT staff on our application. I am happy to report that out of 450 applications, being in the top 100 is highly recommended. They're the only ones that actually received funding in this latest round. 41 received funding, so we are right there yearly being selected. So the next Tiger round will actually commence as early as this June, as the understanding from US DOT. I know several people, several elected officials and other stakeholders in this room have worked with me very carefully and been very supportive of this project, and we're going to go right through it all over again. We're going to try to get this funded, hopefully, especially with this upcoming round. So I want to give you a heads up, and hopefully we'll continue our partnership as we go forward here and make a stronger application. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, ask Charles Bradsky to speak to the quarterly reports that are coming out and dates that communities should be meeting with staff to make sure everything's on track for your grants and roadways.
Yes, as most of you may or may not, most of you are aware, each community is required to meet with NIRPC and with NDOT on their projects that they have coming up in the pipeline. And they are required to do this quarterly. Those quarterly reports are due into NDOT on April 30th. Although I know NDOT has had they just revamped their SPMS system, their scheduled program management software. And that has caused a couple questions by some communities, but they are working to get that up and running, and if there's any glitches, it's taken care of almost immediately. So those reports are due on April 30th, and then 2 weeks later on May 11th, which is a Thursday, May 12th, which is Friday, and May 15th on a Tuesday, we'll be sitting down with each individual community and NDOT and talking about their projects that they have in the pipeline. Thursday will be at LaPorte District, one of their conference rooms, and then Friday and Tuesday will be here at NIRPC offices. Any questions?
I just want all the mayors and commissioners to be aware of it as it impacts your grant, your funding, and it shows good faith with the Fed and the state. The next meeting of the Technical Planning Committee will be May 6th, or May 8th, will be Tuesday, May 8th, 2018, at 9 a.m. in NIRPC. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the NDOT report. Rick Powers?
Lorraine. We're going to have to pull a mic in real close today. We've already elbow bumped once. I don't know what it is, but it's just short of pestilence, I think. Because we've seen snow, rain, frost heave. We've had a winter. I think they call that winter in Northwest Indiana, right?
When did the locust
offering much more than what you heard from Lindsay and Matt. Would just say that's what we're doing operationally. I think at a glance, the last I saw, we've spent close to 25,000 hours already in pothole repair. It has been a real winter this year, and our pavement is showing it. Some of the things you've seen on 65, the seam failures and so on, some of the longer term fixes we've had to take into consideration that aren't normal pothole filling has been a result of that. We've had some HMA or asphalt plants that were delayed in opening because they were under maintenance. So it was just one of those winters where everything seemed to compound the condition that we were trying to fight all winter. And now I'm fighting this. So here we go. Coming out of it, I think it's just getting a little bit weary. But we are out there. Our crews are out there. You're starting to see the orange pop through the white, even though we woke up to white this morning. So the barrels will be forthcoming. Construction season is open. We have a lot going on. There's a lot in the pipeline to the point of planning. In fact, I just came back from Michigan where I was kind of excited to see some alternative transportation ideas that don't always involve concrete and I guess more expensive ways of doing things, that electronic traffic management and some things like that I think of the Mormon behind me often and travel it and think, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? There are people out there thinking of those kinds of things, and we're not always the ones that have to come up with a great idea. So I was somewhat, impressed, when I went and visited in a kind of a peer exchange program to see what some of the things are doing. And if you get a chance, if you're up in the Ann Arbor area, go up on the north side of the highway. It's just because my head, I'm taking decongestant. But they were using an electronic traffic management system to basically increase traffic movement. Few physical barriers involved, just using a shoulder, some of the things that we are accustomed to seeing in our area here, but using electronic management and visibility in a traffic management center to try to be a little bit more, creative in what we already have. To Pat's point earlier, taking care of what we have could also be using more of what we have and including that in the inventory for travel rather than refuge. So we'll see where that goes and where the planning goes on it, but it gave me a glimmer of hope that I was somewhat dimmed of late as I drove the Mormon and see some of the things we're doing just to maintain infrastructure rather than improve it. So that being said, there's not a whole lot more going on that you haven't heard in the presentation and what you've seen this winter, other than me to get an elbow bump if you see, because I don't know what this is, but hopefully it's not bad. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
I just want to publicly thank Mr. Powers for the work that NDOT's doing on 51 between Route 20 and Route 30. It actually takes in 3 communities, Gary, Lake Station, and Albert. I just want to say thank you for the work they're doing. It's a big project, much bigger than I even realized. I just want to say thank you for the work they're doing.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks. Anybody else? Announcements, Bob?
I've got 3 of them.
Okay.
First of all, anyone that has volunteers that volunteer in your community, there's not a price tag to pay for all the things they do. And I would like each and every one of you to thank any volunteers that work in your community, because National Volunteer Week is April 15th through May 25th. So if you got people that volunteer, give them a pat on the back and say, thanks for doing that, we appreciate it. Okay?
Start with our firemen, right?
All right, next, 16 Plus is meeting on April 27th. We had the United States District Attorney who was going to speak, and he got rerouted to Chicago and had to cancel that out. And he will be there May 25th. And that's a Thursday at 9 a.m. in the Sharonville Town Hall. But for our April 27th meeting, we were able to get House Slager, our legislator, and he's going to come in at 9 a.m. and give us a legislative wrap-up. So I hope that all 16 plus East Chicago, Gary, and Hammond show up to that meeting at 9 o'clock in April and May. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Ms. Luther reminded me that Porter County Earth Day is at Expo Center on Saturday. So it's a great event.
It is.
Just real quickly, just want to acknowledge Leah in the audience today from One Region. Again, Leah, welcome. Also, just we had a great tour of Northwest Indiana that Leah conducted through One Region. A lot of you were on. Mayor Tom was a phenomenal tour guide.
I have a future as a tour guide.
You do. Clearly did. Clearly. So just thank you again for showcasing the highlights that are Northwest Indiana. Really, really well done. I also thought it was worth drawing attention. We made a slight format change to your agenda packet, and just lest it just get missed. On the inside front cover, you'll see the mission and vision for Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission. Always helpful to go back to why we exist and what we do and what our focus is. So that is now right inside the front cover. And your names as representatives to NIRPC are on the inside and back cover also reformatted to make it a little bit more clear to who's on the so unless that slipped by, I just wanted to draw your attention to a slight formatting change. And while I've got your attention, just again to underscore, as you can get to one of these 2050 meetings, it's a great opportunity to be able to talk to your constituents about their hopes for the future, as well as hear from other folks that may be there as far as their visions for the next 30 years. So.
I was going to also add, in response to the questions about public meetings that Commissioner Carnahan had, if we don't have a public meeting scheduled in your community, please reach out to myself or Trey. We can come out to a town council meeting, chamber meeting, and talk to folks that way with a presentation or an opportunity. So don't feel restricted by those meeting locations.
Thank you.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, I want to go back to with public comment with Mr. Nowacki's point about the RDA moving their meeting onto the top of our meeting. Our meetings have been set on this day for as long as I can remember. I've been coming here for over 15 years. I agree with Mr. Nowacki that it's not right, it's not good government for the RDA to schedule on top of our meetings, and maybe another letter from Ty, or maybe a letter on behalf of the board asking them not to do that, because I know for a fact there's people that go to both meetings, and forcing you to choose two governments meeting at the same time is not transparent. It's not good governance. So I wanted to point out, I agree with that. And I want to also point out that NIRPC is consistently on these days, as I know Mr. Nowacki knows, the RDA just sort of chooses when they're going to meet. So I don't know if we want to make a motion or send a letter, but I agree with Mr. Nowacki in this situation.
I'll make a motion that we address the issue again with RDA.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I would just add, you're absolutely right, that last time I drafted the letter, it took a while, but they did eventually change the regular meeting schedule so it wouldn't conflict. I don't have an explanation for what happened today, but they scheduled it. They had moved their regular meeting cycle off of ours, but...
The RDA has a very consistent meeting schedule, and it seems to me it's sort of helter-skelter when they meet. And I think it's reasonable to ask that they just don't meet on the same time we meet. I think it's a really good plan.
Proves that government works, Mr. Nowacki. There you go.
I don't want everyone to thank me at the same time, though.
Anything else? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in favor? Aye. Done.